Good afternoon, everyone, and particularly the Wurdale community. My name is Raj Samurai, and my co-host Julie Owens will be taking you on this journey of fire safety essentials. This presentation is going to last for the duration of about an hour to an hour and a half. It's very much dependent on you for interaction and engagement. So I welcome you to Fire Safety Essentials. And without further ado, I would do our traditional acknowledgement of country. So this is the acknowledgement of traditional custodians of the land on which we're hosting this online meeting today, and pay our respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging, and of course, any other Aboriginal people here today. I would now like to hand over to Julie to give you an introduction to the technology that's involved today. Thank you, Julie.
Thank you, Raj. Yes, you're participating in a webinar. So a webinar means that you can hear us and you can see us, but you cannot turn your own mic or camera on. So we can't actually see or hear you. So to communicate with us, we ask you to use the chat function. I also must mention that we're recording this session, and the recording is for Raj and my benefit only. You will not be recorded, and nothing you talk to us about through the chat or the polls will be recorded. So be reassured that you can ask any questions and we'll attempt to answer them. So now with the chat function, if you hover your mouse, if you're on a computer over the chat, a box will appear, and in that box you will then be able to type in a question. Raj and I will both be monitoring that chat during the session, and we will answer any questions that we can. The other thing you could do is raise your hand by hovering the mouse over the hand, and that way we can get back to you. But you'll have to talk to us through the chat function. During the session, we will also be running polls, and a poll will pop up on your screen. There will be a number of questions, and you will be able to click on the poll that we're asking you responses to. In fact, Raj, we might start off with the poll.
Perhaps a quick chat function just to find out where people are joining us from.
Chat, yeah. So if anyone would like, and in that chat, if anyone could let us know where they're from. Which part of the area do you live? And how long you've been there. So just in the chat function, if you can push where it says to, make sure it says all panelists and attendees, and just type in just a little bit about yourself. That would be good.
I've noticed from our attendees, Julie, that we've got Christine Trotter on board. Now, Christine is attending today's presentation. So, Christine, it'd be great to hear from you. And as I say, this is all about sharing information and helping us all learn more about fire and fire behaviour. So don't be shy if you are able to. There you go. Thanks, Christine. So you live in Jurang.
Sorry, Raj.
Do you know where Jurang is? Are you familiar with Jurang?
Me? No.
Oh, fantastic. So
are you familiar with?
I'm not. It's obviously very, very local to our area of investigation today. You know, it must be near Wurdale. Is that right? Oh, 15 minutes from Winchelsea.
Oh, okay.
West from Geelong. Fantastic. Well, thank you, Christine, for giving us some kind of geographical sense of where you're at. So this particular presentation will be particularly relevant to you. And as I say, you know, this is very much an entry-level presentation. So we're covering off the essentials when it comes to fire safety. We'll be looking at a number of areas, and I might just go into our next slide to give us a bit more idea of what that really means. And another thing I'd like to make you quite clear is that there's no need to take any notes or of any description. All the resources that we refer to during this presentation will be available through our resource information that can be downloaded at the end of the presentation. So just sit back, listen, absorb, and interact with the contents, which we all get something from it.
Before you do that, Raj, before you go any further, I might open the first poll.
Oh, absolutely.
Because the first poll asks us a little bit more about yourself. And this is, like I said, we can't tell who's answering these questions, but these questions are very basic and they will give the CFA some idea of where you live and why you're on this session. So how long have you lived in the area? So 10 plus years, Christine, you've already answered that. Have you been to a CFA meeting before? And how did you find out about this session? So either, so have you been to a meeting before? Yes, no, or you can't remember. How did you find out about this session? It was recommended by a family, friend, neighbour, social media or the brigade page, a newspaper advertisement or community notice board or other. And then how do you rate your knowledge of fire? Very low, low, medium, high, or very high. If you could answer each of those, just click on one of those in each of those sessions questions for us. And at the end of that, press the submit button because that will submit the answers. And I can see that that's been done. So I'm going to end the poll and I'm going to share the results. So it's already been established 10 or more years. You have been to a CFA session before, heard about it through social media, and you rate your knowledge as medium of fire. So thank you for that. With those results, Raj, I'll hand it back to you.
Fantastic. So Christine, if you can just close out to that poll there. Fantastic. Thank you for doing that. And thanks for your feedback. The most interesting response that I found there was the fact that you found out about this session through social media. And later on in the presentation, we'll be talking about the power of social media when it comes to communication. So that's an interesting point. On the slide now is the key learnings we want you to take away from today. And as I say, Christine, if you've already got a reasonable knowledge around fire, there may not be that much new here, but we hope that through interaction, we'll find other bits of information that we can give you or impart to you that will help you further understand fire and fire behaviour. Okay, local risks, what are they in our area? Okay, particularly in Wurdale. What to expect from a fire? You know, fire is just not flames. There's more to fire than just flames. What's the communication thread that I keep talking about? How do we know if there's a fire in the area? Planning and decision making, absolutely crucial when it comes to staying safe during our very intense fire periods. And of course, the best laid plans can fail. What are our survival options? We'll be talking a bit more about that shortly. So without further ado, let's get really underneath the skin of fire and understand our local risks. What are our local risks? Before I go there, I might just say a bit about Wurdale in terms of its background and also its surrounding area. Wurdale is actually located in the municipality of the Surf Coast, and District 7 is how we refer it in CFA language. One thing that is for sure, and Julie and I have both experienced this when we've been doing our face-to-face interactions with communities around and about, is the tremendous amount of community spirit that lives in our rural townships and our small towns as well. It's that very, I suppose, community connection that is the strength of community emergency services like the Country Fire Authority, because we very much rely on that level of support and connectedness. Community is all about looking after members within your community. And with Wurdale being a relatively small population, you tend to find there's a great deal of connection between people. And this is the strength of the CFA and the very core messages of what the CFA is about. What I'd like to do now is explore this a bit further by looking at Victoria. Victoria, as this slide clearly shows, is actually one of the world's most bushfire-prone parts, okay? We talk about America and California. Victoria is no different in its vulnerability and susceptibility to fire. Why is this so, I hear you ask? This is because of the landscape. Victoria is a changing landscape. The landscape can be made up of grassland, bushland, mountainous areas, as well as an extensive amount of farmland. I know that Wurdale in particular is extensively farmland. We know that this part of the world, this continent of Australia, has had fire in its midst for millions of years, absolutely millions of years. And this has been significant in shaping the terrain that I've just spoken about. Many fires were started by lightning. Our Aboriginal people used fire for many thousands of years to care for country. These fires were a tool that encouraged the growth and extent of grasslands to enhance hunting, for one reason. It reduced levels of fuel and kept vegetation at bay. It stopped it from becoming too dense and hard to walk through. Interestingly, records of bushfire activity only really started at around about 1851, just at the start of European settlement, if you like, at the early stages. So there's a bit of interesting background about how vulnerable our part of the world is and how fire has been used to some extent to control that vulnerability. What I'm showing you now is a map of our region. This is the state of Victoria. And as you can see, it's color coded. And these colors actually denote the different weather districts that exist across our state. The Southwest District, where we're located to the bottom left there, as is clearly significant and separate to East Gippsland or the Northern Country. The main take-home messages here is that each fire or weather district will have its own level of fire risk, okay? So we could be at a very critical time in terms of our fire control, whereas other parts of the state may not be as impacted. And this is all as a result of the different weather district that we live in. Let's put another layer onto this, and particularly for you, Christine, the seasonal outlook. What do we mean by seasonal outlook? The seasonal outlook describes the overall weather trend of what's happening in your weather district. Okay, let's just take this one step further as I move to the next slide. And I don't want to blind you with signs and too many graphs or anything like that. My principal aim is for you to understand that we're currently in what we call a La Nina effect. La Nina as opposed to El Nino. And I'll talk about El Nino in a second. We are currently in a La Nina weather pattern. What does this mean? This means that this year or this season, it's expected to reduce the risk of prolonged fire activity across most of Victoria compared to last year. So one would think that we're in a safer period, if you like, because there's a higher amount or a lesser risk of fire during the La Nina conditions. What does La Nina actually mean? What do we mean when we say La Nina? Well, it means increased rainfall across much of Australia, as is typified by the map on the right-hand side, okay? Increased rainfall across much of Australia. However, there will be cooler daytime temperatures, that's south of the tropics, and warmer overnight temperatures to the north. This is exemplified by the map on the left-hand side. For your information, the last La Nina effect happened during the winter of 2017-18, and its counterpart, or its cousin, El Nina, came along in 2018-19. So as we can see, there's this duality of weather trends that play hopscotch with each other. When one is on, the other one is off. What does this mean to Wurdale, Christine? What does La Nina mean to Wurdale? Well, Wurdale is in a part of Victoria that has experienced slightly above average rainfall through the La Nina effect, obviously. And what this has meant, naturally, is that the soil moisture is at a higher than normal level. More moisture in the soil means more growth. More growth means more fuel. More fuel means a greater risk of fast-moving grass fires, because when this rapidly growing fuel dries, and we call it curing, when it's fully cured or fully dried, there is the increased potential for ignition of this fuel, i.e. lighting of this fuel, such that rapid moving grass fires will be the order of the day in the event of a bad fire day. So, take home messages. Yes, it is wetter than normal. But that doesn't mean that the fire danger is any less. In fact, it could be more prolific because the fuel is growing at an excessively fast rate and therefore available for ignition or lighting. Take home message: like every season, there is a need to be prepared for a fire that could happen due to this high fuel load. Let's drill that down a bit more when we talk about the local vegetation. Now, Christine, by way of the chat function, just let Julie and I know, how would you describe the landscape in Wurdale or perhaps in Jurang where you actually live? Just pop it into the chat function for me while I just queue up my information here. What is the landscape? Okay, mainly bush. And I would be in total agreement with you there, because the predominant fuel around Wurdale is actually grass with areas of bush and bush along the roadside. And yes, an extensive amount of farmland as well. Granted, I agree. Okay, so you'd have to agree that this is a combination, as we've spoken about, that presents an area at risk of fast-moving grass fires with likely ember attack from the nearby bush, and we spoke about bush earlier, to the north, northwest, and also the west of Wurdale as well. What does this mean to you? It means that open grassland is susceptible to the wind, okay? The wind is the driving force when it comes to fire direction. If the wind is pushing in a particular direction, the fire will travel in that direction. If there is a change of direction, the change of wind direction, the fire will change direction. And that's why when we talk about fast-moving grass fires, if we know that a fire is moving towards us, we need to move out of its way. We need to leave and leave early. There's always that possibility that a wind direction may come along and your property may be spared, but that's too much of a risk to take. Let's just layer another factor on top of that as well, which is undulations, the lay of the land. If we have hills or we have rises and steep falls or steep climbs, as a rule of thumb, fire will travel much faster uphill than it will downhill. In actual fact, for every 10-degree rise in inclination of a hill or an incline, a fire will double in speed. Yep, it'll double in speed. So often we can become a bit complacent and think we've got time and there's nothing to worry about because there's a couple of big hills between us and the fast-moving grass fire. The actual fact of the matter is that the fire will travel much faster up the hill and get to you much faster than you think. And again, the wind will be a big player in that too. And of course, fuel and fuel load. But we've already identified that at this present time, we do have a large amount of fuel load in our paddocks, on the bush, maybe some farmland. They'll actually provide, and if you think about the fire triangle, the three elements that need to be available for a fire to actively move forward: fuel, ignition, and oxygen. The fuel's there in the plentiful amount of grass. We've got the ignition source, which will be the high temperatures and driven by the wind. And of course, oxygen. It's a combination for fast-moving grass fires. I'm going to move on to the next slide now, which will give us a bit more information about the local risks. And what I'd like to do, Julie, with your help, is perhaps launch another poll identifying those local risks, perhaps in the Wurdale area.
Thank you, Raj. I am going to launch another poll now, which actually is a multiple choice poll this time. There's no wrong or right answer. We just need to know what you think. And the question is, what are some of the things that could make your local area a high risk area for fire? So we've got narrow winding roads, trees hanging over access and escape routes, high tourists area in summer, the speed of grass fires up to 20 kilometres an hour, numerous grass fires sparked by embers, or high fuel load. So if you'd like to click on one more or more of those answers, what do you think are your local risks of fire or the high risks in your area? Thank you very much. I'll end the polling and I'll share the results, and you'll see the trees hanging over access roads and escape routes, numerous grass fires sparked by embers, and high fuel load. I think, Raj, if you look at where Christine lives, right next to the bush, that yes, those are the things that are high risks in her area.
Fantastic.
I'll stop sharing the results now, and if that little box is still open, Christine, just close it.
Yeah, I think I might just have a bit of a debrief around some of those answers as well, Julie, just for Christine's sake. A lot of our localities are very fire prone, and we can at times mitigate some of those risks, but at times there's not a great deal that we can do. We can't do much about trees hanging over access roads and escape routes unless those trees are on our property and we can in some way trim the trees and limit or mitigate that risk. There's not a great deal that we can do about the numerous grass fires that are sparked by embers, other than perhaps keeping our grass low, but that's not always possible. And of course, high fuel load. With the La Nina effect, we're finding that a lot of our contractors, some farmers and perhaps members of the council are finding it extremely difficult to keep on top of our high roadside fuel because the grass is going far faster than they can actually maintain to keep on top of it. So those are important considerations. I'm glad that you've been able to identify those, Christine. So I'm going to close my box at this end as well and move on to say, well, up until this stage, we've been able to get a basic understanding around fire behaviour, and it's very basic at this stage. You've been able to get an awareness of the various risks that are involved, the local risks in the Wurdale area. And both Julie and I just want to reinforce, and this common thread will come out during the course of the presentation, is reinforce the need to have a plan, have that element of preparation. There's also that thing about taking personal responsibility. And what do I mean by that? Well, if we consider the Wurdale Brigade, it's made up of a number of brigade members who work extremely hard to try and keep the community safe in the events of a fire. At their disposal, they have two resources, one tanker and one ultralight. And their task, armed with these two elements of resource, is to look after a population of 678 people living in a total of 351 properties. The question at this stage, Christine, is a rhetorical question around, well, hey, what's the likelihood of a CFA tanker and crew coming to your property and putting out that fire on a bad fire day? Bearing in mind that the services of the brigade will also be pulled in other directions as well. So I might just leave that there hanging for you. And it's not rocket science, is it? We can appreciate that we need to take personal ownership of the situation. We need to make sure that we know what our capability is. We need to know that the resources of the brigade are going to be pushed and not to expect them on our drive. And if we go into this emergency management with that in mind, we know that therefore we need to take ownership and have a plan. Prepare a plan that's going to allow us to be out of harm's way and out of harm's way in an early, timely manner. Okay, so I'll let that sit there for a bit while we go on to the next part of the presentation, which is all about what to expect from a fire. What is it about fire and fire behaviour that is actually the most deciding factor when it comes to safety? Without a shadow of a doubt, Victoria, as already said, has had a lot of fires, okay? Last summer, we saw huge fires in multiple parts of the state. Let's explore that a bit further now. I'm going to show you an animation, and this animation is graphic, it's revealing, and it's harsh, and it's designed to be, because the very nature of fire is such. So if you are sensitive to this sort of thing, and welcome Vicky as well to the presentation, if you are sensitive to anything graphic like this, or if it's in any way going to cause an emotional distress, please look away for the duration of the presentation. But what I'd like to do is show the presentation now. The The presentation itself will talk for itself. So here goes. This is all about embers as a key component of fire behaviour.
During a bushfire, embers will reach your home long before the flames do. Ember attacks are the most common way that houses catch fire. Embers are burning leaves, twigs and pieces of bark. They help the bushfire spread by starting spot fires ahead of the main fire front. Short-distance ember attacks happen when leaves and small pieces of bark are blown from burning trees. The intense shower of sparks that forms fills the air with hot, burning embers, which will land on nearby vegetation and properties. The hot embers can easily land and get into your clothes and burn your skin, eyes and airways. Small fires will start all around you and quickly become uncontrollable. The resulting chaos creates confusion as the fire seems to come from many directions, meaning it will be difficult to make good decisions about your safety. The experience will be physically exhausting and emotionally traumatic. Long-distance ember attack is caused by large bushfires that generate intense heat. As the hot air rises, it forms a column of smoke that sucks in air like a vacuum, increasing the intensity of the fire. The updraft in the column lifts embers, like large pieces of burning ribbon bark, hundreds of metres into the air, where strong winds can carry them many kilometres beyond the fire front. On Black Saturday, embers travelled more than 30 kilometres ahead of the main fire. When these embers land, they often start fires where leaves naturally accumulate, like in gutters, doorways and garden beds. So while you might think you're safe when a bushfire is far away, embers can fall from the sky and land around your home long before you even know there's a fire. But remember, your home isn't the only thing under threat during an ember attack. By the time you realise the danger, it might be too late as escape routes become jammed. Embers can also start fires on roads and block them completely, making late evacuation dangerous or impossible. That's why leaving early, before a fire starts, is always your safest option.
Do you know, I've viewed that presentation quite a few times now during the course of facilitating these presentations, and it gets me every time. You know, that kind of indiscriminate nature of fire, the harshness of the reality. This particular animation is designed to give you that effect. It's dramatic because ember attack itself is a life-threatening. Not only does it threaten life, but it also causes the biggest cause of property loss during a fire. And, you know, when we talk about risk management and risk mitigation, if we know that there's something out there that's going to cause this amount of damage to life and property, why be in its way? Why wait for it to come to you? The CFA are passionate and we strongly advocate for you to have a fire plan and to leave early, well before the fire front arrives. The moment you sense something's not right, it's the time to leave. Have a plan. And we'll be talking more about that very shortly. I'm just going to cue up the next animation. And again, it's designed to have impact. I've worked in the health industry for many years. And one of the things that we always tried to do when it came to delivering good community messaging was to make something that was going to stick in people's minds, to reflect the reality of the situation. And I think, you know, this is what these animations do. Julie, would you like to add a few words while I find the next animation?
Yes, of course. Thank you, Raj. So just as an ember attack is the greatest loss, can be the greatest loss of property during a fire, radiant heat can be the greatest loss of human life during a fire. So this animation will show you the effects of radiant heat on the body. Once again, it is very graphic, so look away if it does disturb you.
Thanks, Julie. Radiant heat.
Victoria is one of the most bushfire-prone parts of the world. Every summer, bushfires threaten properties and lives. But did you know it's not the flames that kill most bushfire victims? No, it's the radiant heat. Most victims die from the effects of radiant heat long before they're reached by the flames. Radiant heat is what you feel when you sit next to a campfire. If a campfire heats up to 2 kilowatts per square metre, you'll feel that it's too hot and will want to move back from the fire. If you don't, this amount of radiant heat is enough to cause burns and blisters in as little as 40 seconds. At 12 kilowatts, it can cause some materials like dry timber to ignite. A bushfire can reach 100 kilowatts, and the effects can be truly catastrophic. For humans, radiant heat can cause burns from 100 metres away and cause a dangerous increase in body temperature. Radiant heat can cause the rapid onset of heat stroke. Heat stroke damages your brain, meaning you won't be able to concentrate to make good decisions as the fire arrives. Other impacts include severe damage of internal organs and death. There are some things you can do if you're caught in a fire. Cover your skin with long-sleeved natural fibre clothing, like wool. It's also useful to know that radiant heat only travels in straight lines and can't bend around corners. So, sheltering behind or inside solid structures may help protect you. But be aware, radiant heat will travel straight through glass. The best defense against radiant heat is a simple one. If you're not anywhere near a bushfire, its radiant heat can't hurt you. Leaving early is always your safest option.
Always your safest option. When we talk about radiant heat, leaving early is always your safest option. We spoke very briefly there about ember attack, and one point I just want to say before we move any further is that although we've got ember attack, which are those sort of embers that fly a long distance up to 30 k's away from the fire front, we've also got a thing called direct flame damage. And this is where flames will move along from a rapid moving grass fire or a canopy fire, for example, and actually impact your property. And the only way to mitigate that risk or reduce the likelihood of that happening is to have a break in that continuity of fuel. And they often say that, you know, if you've got fuel to your doorstep, you will have fire to your doorstep. So mitigate the risk, stop the risk by having some kind of break, a barrier. A gravel drive, for example, would be perfect to limit that continuity of fuel. And as Julie said, radiant heat is the biggest killer. And what I'm going to do at this stage, while we're on this sort of, in this area of emotion and what people felt when they were in these fire situations, I just want to share the following slide with you, which is a written comment by people that were caught in fire situations. And I think their statements speak volumes. I'm going to layer this with another animation that I'd like to share with you. This animation is entitled, "I'll Never Do That Again." And it looks at an experience of those people that were caught in a fire situation and the comments that they made following that experience. So I'll never do that again.
"10 years ago, when all the dams were full and the tanks were full and there was plenty of water, I probably would have stayed. and I would have died.
Nothing went the way we might have anticipated.
Whatever preparations you put into place, you only need something small to go wrong.
You know, in future, I don't think we'd want to put the kids through that sort of trauma, I guess. Yeah, wouldn't put the kids through that again.
If it was my choice, I wouldn't stay again. If we had another day like that, if I had the opportunity to get out, I would go before the fire even got here.
And once again, before the fire even got here.
So Raj, you'll see from the those people actually talking about their experiences, what they thought before the fire, what they thought they would do and what their plan was, and then after the fire, how they felt about that. So they were real people talking about real experiences.
Absolutely, they were. And that's kind of why it's all the more harrowing. We've got these first-hand accounts from people that were caught in a fire situation. And, you know, they spoke about trauma to family members, to children. And trauma is one of these things that we can never, ever remove completely. It's there with you for life, generally. So what are some of the key messages up until this part of the presentation? We're probably more than halfway through now. And the kind of picture that we're trying to portray is that fire is not a nice place. We all get that. We understand it even more now because we know about ember attack and radiant heat. We know it's stressful. We know that it's traumatic. You know, when we talk about the amount of pressure that we're putting on ourselves, particularly if we don't have a plan, if we don't have a fire plan and we're not prepared to stick to it, or something goes wrong, or exit roads are blocked, and you know, you're dealing with a force of Mother Nature that is uncontrollable and that is also unpredictable. Let's launch a poll at this stage, Julie, around some of those considerations that people need to have that might impact their ability to make good decisions.
So this poll is simply asking you, what do you think would impact your ability?
Just your ability to make good decisions.
Sorry, here we go. Yeah. Your ability to make good decisions. So now this is a multiple choice again. So it's either stress, rapidly changing situations, things not going to plan, not having enough time, or communication breakdown. Once again, we can't tell who's putting what. You can use one or all of those, or just a couple of them. Just click on them, and then don't forget to press the submit button at the bottom of the poll so that your answers are submitted. Just give you a few more seconds to think about each of those. So I'll end the polling there, and you'll see that each of those answers, I'll share the results, each of those answers are 100%. Each of those things impact your ability to make good decisions, especially in a fire situation.
Mm. And, you know, thanks, Julie. And you know, the one thing that really stands out here is stress. Stress is the one element of human behavior that underpins all of those other things, because the other things cause that stress burden to increase. The stress burden is actually is heightened because you're dealing with a situation that you're not prepared for. It's rapidly changing to you, around you. You're alien to it because you know nothing about the nature of fire. We're hoping that this Fire Safety Essentials will give you some of the core understandings of fire behavior, such that that situation is not that alien to you. You understand about embers and radiant heat and about how to seek refuge and what to wear. All these will reduce your stress burden. There's nothing worse than things not going to plan. And as I say, the best laid plans can fail. There's nothing worse than not having enough time. It's like, you know, sometimes you might be trying to get somewhere from A to B and the clock's ticking and the pressure is you find it difficult to deal with it. And ultimately, communication breakdown, not being able to know what's going on around you. not knowing where the children are in the event of a critical fire day. What's happening with the animals? Where's my husband? Is he on the tractor? Is he on the farm? Did he pop it out to do that errand and he didn't tell me? I don't know where he is. All this compounds your level of stress. And that's one thing that we don't need, because if stress is heightened, we make irrational decisions. We make decisions that aren't thought through. And often it's these decisions that can cause fatalities and the loss of life. And I make no bones about that. I'm now going to close the poll box on my end and just move on to our next slide, which looks at the elements of, well, how do you know if there is a fire? What's the communication channels that we use? And it might be an idea here, Julie, just to open up the chat page and see what people think about where do they get their fire information in their area.
Don't forget, when you use the chat function, to press to all panelists and in attendees. And if you just type in where you get your information, where you look for information to see if there's a fire. The Vic Emergency app is one way. Just think of all the ways that you might get that information. And there will be a number of different ways. There's not always just one way you get that. The local Facebook page, neighbourhood, neighbours, as the mobile coverage could be terrible, yes, the government apps. So all different ways. So Raj will, before we go into that, talking a bit more about how you do get that information, we might talk about the fire danger ratings, Raj.
Yes, indeed. So now that you've had a chance to think about where you'd get the information from, you could potentially be getting your information from the fire danger rating, the FDR. Now, there's a fair bit of confusion that surrounds this in terms of what people really understand of the FDR. What does it really mean? So if we can launch a poll to get some idea of, okay, what's your understanding of the FDR, Julie? That'll be really good.
This will just ask us what you think, and everyone's seen those signs on the sides of the road or in the paper on the web page, that sign, which is the FDR. So I'll just launch this poll, which is asking you, what does the FDR, the fire danger rating, mean? And you've got two choices there, so just choose one of those. Either it's an indication of how likely a fire will start or an indication of how bad a fire will be. How many code red days? So code red ones are those ones with the red with the stripe through. Has there been in the southwest region in the last 5 years? And how many severe or extreme days have happened in the southwest region in the last 5 years? So if you could just tick one of those, and it's just what you think. This is just to give us an idea of what you think of those things.
And also, don't worry if you don't know what a code red day is or what a severe or extreme day is, because Julie and I will be talking and explaining more about that shortly. This is very much a learning exercise. Even an understanding of the FDR is quite crucial. So it's all part of the learning process for all of us. So feel free to have a go. Your replies are anonymous. So offer your feedback and we will share those results shortly. Just give them a couple of few seconds.
Yep, another couple of seconds. And as Raj says, we can't tell who has actually answered which ones. So, all right, I think I'll close the poll now, end the polling and share the results. And you'll see that most people think that the FDR is an indication of how likely a fire will start. Should I talk on that now, Raj?
Yes, please.
It's actually, the FDR is actually an indication of how bad a fire would be if it were to start. So a fire could start, and I'll just explain that in a little bit when we go on to the next slide. But the code red day, how many has there been in the southwest region in the last 5 years? There's been none. There's in the southwest, and that's the area in which we are. There's been no code red days. There's been a couple in other parts of the state, but not in the southwest. And the severe and extreme, there has been 6 in the last fire season. So it's a bit, I might explain now, if I stop sharing those results and close our box, just explain what that means in relation to the fire danger rating. So a fire can start at any time. Even a low moderate day, on a low moderate day, a fire can start. On a day of high fire danger, a fire can start. But if it's a severe fire, so each of those, the low, moderate or the high or the very high, fires will start, can start. We have fires in winter in the right conditions. But if you have a severe day, you will see a fire. It's usually a hot, dry and possibly windy day. And if a fire starts and takes hold, it may be uncontrollable. And that's where a fire danger rating comes in. So they indicate how difficult it will be to control a fire if there was a fire to start. On an extreme day, it will be hot, dry and windy again. And if a fire starts and takes hold, it will be uncontrollable, unpredictable and fast moving. Spot fires will result and they will move quickly and come in many directions. And then that's an extreme day. And then on a code red day, it's the worst possible conditions for a fire. So it's hot, windy, dry. Conditions are as bad in the bush as they are in the grasslands. Homes are not designed or constructed to withstand fires in those conditions, and neither are people, obviously. So your best option on that day is to leave early and not be there, not be in those situations. So leaving a high risk bushfire or grass fire area the night before is your safest option. You don't wait to be told, and you don't wait to see if a fire starts, because on each of those days it is highly likely the fire will be difficult to control.
Thank you, Julie. So when we talk about getting information, we live in a world, and I'm sure you acknowledge this in Wurdale, that we are blasted at every level with communication or information, whether it's the traditional means of radio or newspaper or even the spoken word. You know, John talking to Frank over the garden fence, Mavis meeting Hilda in the coffee shop. It's all about communication and hearing information from different sources. Now, on the screen in front of you, you've got a number of what we call informal information sources. And that includes all our social media or digital platforms. And the icons are commonplace these days, the Snapchats, the Facebooks, the YouTubes, the Twitter. We are bombarded from every avenue with information, both formal and informal. What you're seeing here is informal routes of information. This, you could question, is it credible? Is it evidence-based? And is it real-time information? How legitimate is this information? You have to ask yourself. The CFA would strongly advocate for the use of the following information channels, information sources. And by far, and we've already mentioned it a number of times, the Vic Emergency app is one of the best, if not the best, information source to have on your mobile phone to define weather activity on a bad fire day. It has the capacity to tell you what the weather conditions are, either in your locality or the surrounding area. And you can actually set that for a set radius. If you're traveling from A to B, if you're trying to plan your way away from a fire situation, it will provide you with information to allow you to do that. And it will also give you information about fire activity in the area, and Julie will be talking about that shortly. So number one, the Vic Emergency app. If those of you listening today do not have the Vic Emergency app, please make sure that you're able to download it to your smartphone. I actually do a lot of work with the Property Advice Visit Service, or the PAV service. This is a community door knocking service, and we visit community members and instruct them and give them guidance around property preparation. And one of the key things is to make sure that they understand how the Vic Emergency app works, and we also help them download it to their smartphones. There was reference made earlier about other means of communication as well, including the local news, ABC News, and that in particular is a valuable source of information in the event of a bad fire day, local news. And I'll talk a bit more about the importance of having the battery operated radio very shortly. The other elements mentioned there include the Emergency Management Victoria and of course the National Relay Service and Vic Emergency Hotline. This information is designed to help you in the event of a bad fire day. Use it as your warning system, as your means of communication to keep on top of fire activity in your area. I think Julie's going to say a few words about the next slide.
Yes, the CFA does issue warnings in the case of an event, an incident or a fire. First, in your area. First, you might receive an advice. An advice message is simply to let you know that there is a fire or an incident in your area. This is your chance to access information, get some of that information, get onto some of those things that Raj has just talked about and find out what the activity is and where the danger is. So the advice message is to do that. Get onto one of those and find out what's going on. If you receive a watch and act, that means the emergency is actually developing in your area. You need to actually take action, not just find out what's going on, but you have to decide now whether you enact your fire plan. You need to actually do something. And in an emergency, if you receive an emergency warning, that means that you are in danger, imminent danger, and you must take action immediately. You will be impacted. So that simply might be that you have to shelter in place. Once again, we do advocate that you do not wait for a warning. The best advice that CFA can give you is leave early. If you receive an evacuation advice, that means leave now. It is recommended that you put into place to evacuate where you are to leave. CFA cannot tell you to leave your home. They can advise you to. Police have the authority to do that. So you need to have some idea of where, if you do need to evacuate, where you will go to. And a community information is usually a newsletter or a web page that gives you information about how to access services after an emergency. They're usually put out after an emergency when the threat has passed, but the incident may still be happening or the incident may be, but it gives you an idea of what you should be doing, where you can access information and help. Once again, CFA says, do not wait for a warning. And I think the next slide, the next animation might actually demonstrate why we say don't wait for a warning, because you might be actually ahead of the warning. But this little animation will actually show what that means. So let's say a fire starts, and a fire starts usually, it's usually on its own when it starts. There's not usually many people around when the fire starts, and if there is, they're not going to report it. So the fire starts, and it could be 5 minutes at least before someone reports it. So someone rings 000, and 000 notifies the brigade. So the guys get in the truck, people get in the truck and head towards putting this fire out. The fire in the meantime is getting bigger. So 10 minutes, after 10 minutes, the fire is quite big. Now that's your house. You're sitting in your house. It's a hot, windy day. You're watching TV, you've got your curtains closed, and you receive an advice message. Now remember, the advice message was just find out what's going on. But by the time you receive your advice message, you need more to act. You need to act, because by the time 20 minutes has come, the fire is past your place. So you haven't even got a watch and act message. you'll receive an emergency message, but only after the fire has passed your place. So it just shows you that you may be ahead of the warnings. You may be the one who actually sees the fire to start with. So don't depend on those warnings to get you out of there. You need to have a plan to know what you do yourself, and you need to make those decisions yourself. And I suppose it goes on to saying, instead of sitting in your house with your curtains drawn and watching TV and just wondering when the power goes off that there might be something going on, it's before then that you need to be aware of what's going on around you. So Raj, I might hand it back to you.
So that's a perfect segue for the next part of our presentation, which is all about creating that awareness around you. And the way that we do that is by using our senses, and it's not rocket science. A lot of us, particularly in the Wurdale area and other rural locations, live on the land. We know the land, we know the area, we know every nook and cranny of our townships and the locals that live there. We also have a good intuitive sense of the weather. The sky might look a slightly different color. There might be smoke on the horizon or a smog, or there might be ash or embers falling around you. You know, the very telltale signs that things aren't right. And often is the case that if they're not feeling right, there's a good chance that something is not right. So looking out, using your sense of vision, looking out onto the horizon, checking for anything that's out of the normal. Listening, you know, a lot of our locations contain woodlands and plantations and wooded areas that often can become quite noisy during the event of a fire, with falling and crashing limbs and crackling timber. So listen. Yeah, you might hear sirens in the background somewhere. You might hear heightened activity, and for a quiet township like Wurdale, this would not be the norm. And smell, of course. Why not use your sense of smell? Understand that the smell is not right. It could be smoke. It could be a tarry smell. It could be a smell that's not the norm. So anything that's different will be indicative of a changing environment around you and the potential for fire to be just around the corner. Up until now, we've spoken about some of those key factors of the fire danger rating, the FDR, and how to use it. Make that a tool and link that with the Vic Emergency app and use that as your guide to be away, to be informed early and to leave early. We've spoken about some of those more credible or formal sources of information that you can use, including the Vic Emergency app for one. And Julie's just indicated, we don't wait for a warning. We make tracks early because we may well be ahead of the warnings. Let's pull all this together as we go into the next part of our presentation, which is all about planning and decision making. It brings together the many elements that we've already spoken about. So as Julie goes through this hypothetical or made up situation, just cast your mind back to ember attack. What does severe or extreme mean? What's radiant heat? Where do I look for the warnings? And put it into this presentation such that we can bring it all together for you. So without further ado.
So this scenario puts all those things together like Raj says. So it's a hot and it's a windy day. It's hot and it's dry. It has been dry for a while. But you're at home. You're a bit isolated in that you're not living in a town. You're out on a farm property. And you need to, say, go into Winchelsea. You need to go into Winchelsea. There's something that, there's a parcel there that you've been asked to pick up and you need to pick that up. You look outside and you see that it is hot and windy. It's an extreme day and you wonder whether you should really do that, whether it's going to be safe to do that. But no, you can't. You've looked at your app. There's nothing happening. There's nothing. You've got no advice warnings or anything. It's early in the morning. So, yep, you jump in your car and you head into Winchelsea. You do your things. You do a few bit of shopping and stuff. You know what it's like. You're in there. You meet some people and you're talking. And it's lunchtime. So you decide that it's an early lunch, so you'll grab a bit of lunch before you head home again. So in the coffee shop when you're having your lunch, you hear that there's a fire started in your area, and you think, this could be a bit dangerous. Okay, you've heard it from the person in the area, like in the coffee shop, and you sort of question them, and they don't know much about it. So you jump on the Vic Emergency app to find out where it is, and yes, you see that there has been a fire started in your area, but it's a short distance from your home. But that the indication on the app, the shaded area that shows where the fire will impact, that's a bit away from your home. It's not really quite close to your home. So you think, yep, okay, I can get home. I'm going to jump in the car and I'm going to get home. Just make sure everything's all right. So you jump in the car and you're heading home, and the police have blocked the road. You can't get any further. You try to talk to, you wind your window down and you talk to them. You tell them that you live along this road and that you wanted to get back to your house, but they tell you that you can't go into the area. The fire's still burning. There's some trees down on the road, and you can't go back to your place. What do you do now? How does this make you feel? Is there somewhere that you can go? Have you got a plan as to where you would go now if you were in that situation? How does this make you feel that you can no longer get back to your home? What I might do is launch a poll, and this poll will actually help you to work out how you would feel in a situation like this. So I'll launch the poll, and let's say it's average Wednesday in summer. So it is the extreme day, but it's a Wednesday. Where would you be on that day, Wednesday in summer? Would you be at work, home, or on holidays? And thinking about last summer, before COVID hit, would you have been prepared to spend a few nights away from home in an emergency situation like this? Would you be prepared to turn around and head back into Witchelsea or Geelong or Colac or wherever? And last summer, did you have an emergency kit packed with some clothes, important documents, photos, medicine? So just once again, give you a few seconds to answer those questions, to think about those questions and answer what you would have been doing last summer before COVID. I think everyone's decisions when COVID hit would have been a little bit different, but say it was before COVID. Okay, so we've got our polling done. I'm going to end the polling and share the results. And yes, we see that some people would be at work, some people would be home, and that work for you could have been in Winchelsea, in Colac, in Geelong. Thinking of last summer, would you be prepared? Yes, one of each. And did you have an emergency kit packed? One of each. Very good. That is, it is good that one person or some people would have been prepared. I'm going to stop sharing those results now.
If I could just pass comment there on the very last point there about having the emergency kit ready. As we've said throughout this presentation, it's all about learning. One of the key factors that determines survival is preparation. I'm an ex-Cub Scout, and one of the main things that was always driven home to us was that element of preparation. The preparation is the key. And this emergency management situation, surviving fire, is all about preparation. A well-packed, well-thought-out emergency kit can be the difference between life and death. And when I mentioned to you the battery-operated radio earlier on, I think this might be a good time for me to explain that your battery-operated radio that should be an essential part of the emergency kit could be your only link to the outside world in the event of a bad fire day. So on a severe, extreme code red day, having a battery-operated radio will allow you to communicate with the local radio ABC station, who will give you clear guidance and information about what's happening in the outside world, away from your dark, disorientating, noisy, high stress load world. You will know what's happening with emergency services around you, and that could be potentially your way out. So we'll talk more about the emergency kit shortly, but I thought this was a good point to mention the importance of having one ready and having it available and good to go in the event of an emergency. Thank you.
So if that in that other scenario where you're sitting in your house with your curtains closed and your power goes off, if you have that battery operated radio, you would be able to listen in and receive one of your warnings that way. But let's go back to our scenario now, our hypothetical. Let's say it is the same day, but this time when you hear that there's a fire in your town, the little triangle that shows you where the fire is a little bit further away from your house. So you decide that you do have time to go back to your house and pick up a few things. You know that there's a few things that you need to rescue, you need to take. So you head back to your house and you're not blocked this time, the road's open, you can drive home and you do. So you get to your house and you check your app again just to see where this fire is, because by now you can smell a bit of smoke, you can't really see anything. Remember, it is hot and windy. There's no little bits of leaf falling around, or there is leaf falling around, but there's no embers. So you think, yes, I've got some time to grab a few things. And you run in, you've got your cat basket by the door, so you get the back door, so you grab that and grab the cat who's sound asleep on the bed, put it into the basket and out into the car, and you run back in. You know your passport and your insurance papers are in the filing cabinet. So you run into your study and you grab them and put them in a bag, and then you go into the next room and grab the photos, and then you grab little Joey's best toy rabbit, because you know they wouldn't survive with that. So you grab that and you're running in and out to the car with all these things that you think are really important. And the smoke is starting to smell a bit stronger. The wind seems to be getting a bit heavier, a bit higher. The clouds, the sky is starting to get a bit darker. And then suddenly you actually see bits of embers falling in that pile of leaves that you thought you were going to rake up before summer. The embers are starting to fall around your home. So now how do you feel? What do you do now? Where are you going to go? What are you going to do? How do you feel? And perhaps this time, instead of launching a poll, I might just open up the chat function so that you can let us know, how would you feel and what would you have done differently in a situation like that? If you find yourself in a situation like that, do you drive down the street? Is there someone down your road? Do you head towards a neighbour's place? Do you think you'll be able to get that? Where are your kids? You've got your cat in the basket in the car, but where are the kids? What about your neighbours? Is there a vulnerable neighbour in the area who you think that you should check on? Do you have horses? What's the terrain like, as Raj was saying? Is it hilly? Is there a better way to go? Which way do you go than the way that you come in? How do you feel, and what would you have done differently in a situation like that?
And I think while we're giving our attendees a chance to answer that one, and another thing that I'd like to just throw into the mix, because this really brings it all home, I think, is that it might seem like that we're bombarding you with lots of scenarios and questions and thoughts and what if this and what if that and who's looking after. Bear in mind that this is just a hypothetical. We've just made this up. It's not even the real life situation. And yet that burden, that load, that stress loading is already heightened. So you can only imagine what it would be like if it was a real life situation, if there really was a fire and embers falling around you, and you really did have someone that depended on you and you didn't have that plan. Can you imagine the amount of intense frustration that would cause, and also anxiety and stress? All of these factors make it difficult for us to make informed decisions. Do we really want to be in that space? Do we want to be in that space where we are under such duress? I think not. I think we should be away from that environment to protect ourselves, our family, our pets, and those vulnerable members of our community.
And as Raj was saying before, yes, have a plan, but you need a plan that can be adaptable. There's a comment here, open the gates for the livestock. Go to friends 15 minutes away down the road. But what if the fire is actually on that road? Have you got people that you can go to on the other side, the other way? Yeah. Could you have taken your dogs into town in the first place? Have them in the back of the ute when you went into town, so you didn't have to worry about them being back in your in your house, and you wouldn't have to go back. So those are the sort of things. Oh, not full golden retrievers in town. Oh, they'd be lovely. They'd probably enjoy the trip. But yeah, like those are the sort of things that you need to consider on such a day, and how should you have decided not to go in town in the first place? Right at the beginning of that day, was that your trigger to say, well, no, I don't need to go in town to collect my parcel or whatever. I'm going to stay at home in case there is an incident, and put that plan into place. Have everything by your front door, so that once you get an advice message, once you see that big emergency app pop up, grab those things and jump in your car, and then go check your neighbours 15 minutes away to make sure that they're all right.
Absolutely. So this presentation is designed to give you those thinking patterns, to instill those types of behaviour that are going to keep you safe and ahead of the game, ahead of the fire game. And that's what this is all about, being prepared and having that level of preparation. Planning before the summer starts. Download the Vic Emergency app, and I can't reinforce that enough. And of course, through the CFA, we have the capacity to offer bushfire planning workshops, and those can be resourced and accessed at the end of this presentation through the downloads. I must make a mention to COVID-19 and what that means to us in the event of leaving early. The CFA will allow people to leave a high-risk fire area on a day of high fire danger. If you are in a isolation mode, it's important that you maintain that during the duration of your transfer to your next location. Make sure that the people at your next location are aware that you are isolating, and make sure that you maintain full COVID planning in that transition. You may travel for the purpose of preparing your property for the fire season. That's totally allowable. And let's pray that COVID-19 is not around for much longer. With this recent release of the vaccine, let's hope that we see a sense of normality returning to our communities. Survival options, and this is quite crucial, isn't it? You know, as I said to you at the beginning, the best laid plans can fail. And in this regard, what do you do? We've spoken about a lot of this already through the animation that we showed on radiant heat. Radiant heat kills, it destroys exposed parts of the skin. And if you're not covered up, as this gentleman is, as this gentleman is showing, if you're not covered up, there is a high risk of intense skin burns. We saw the 2 kilowatts per meter squared, the 100 kilowatts per meter squared. We're talking intense heat that will blister and cause cognitive impairment and basically a complete heat stroke situation. We can stay away from that, and we can protect ourselves to some extent by wearing natural fiber clothing. It's quite crucial that if you're not able to have this clothing on at the point of exit, that you carry this in your emergency bag. This is another key component of your emergency bag. Have these elements of clothing packed and ready to go in that emergency bag, together with your battery operated radio, together with important documents, medications, water, a torch, a mobile phone. The list goes on, and that list is available on the resource pack that's available at the end of this presentation. The Leaving Early template contains all that information. The Leaving Early template actually is a cheat sheet that makes the process of planning your exit a lot easier. So look out for that as well in the resource pack. Another consideration for radiant heat was the ability to try to hide inside or behind solid objects, such as buildings, sheds, concrete dams, wherever it might be. Solid protection is the only way that will protect you from radiant heat. Remember, radiant heat travels in straight lines laterally from the heat source, from the fire front. It can't travel around corners, but remember that it will travel through glass, so beware of any shattering or breaking glass that might be dangerous should you be standing near to it. Another key consideration in the event of being caught out, ideally both Julia and I would like for you not to be in this situation, but if survival instincts kick in and you have to survive a fast approaching grass fire or bushfire, you can seek refuge in water courses such as rivers, dams, and swimming pools. They will provide a level of protection from the intense radiant heat, if nothing else. So that's one avenue. Another avenue is that of a stationary car. What we like to say on behalf of the CFA, that cars are designed to get us from A to B. They are not designed to be a place of refuge in the event of a bad fire day or caught out in a fire situation. However, we do understand that when push comes to shove and you're looking for somewhere to seek shelter, a car could potentially be a place of refuge. But there's certain criteria that we need to stick to there if we are going to jump into a car. Julie?
So, yeah, it is never, ever advisable to drive through fire. So if you're in a situation where that happens, then, and you have to shelter in your car, pull off to the side of the road, preferably in a ploughed or cleared paddock or reserve, somewhere where there is very little fuel for that fire. Don't stay on the road because this could cause an accident from another car travelling. It could block emergency services getting to the fire. So try not to stay, but be careful where you are driving. Don't drive so far off the road that you're going to hit a tree or have an accident. A cleared space, as much as you can, find a cleared space to actually park the car in. Keep your lights on so people can see you and get down low. Remember, the radiant heat comes through the windows, so get down low below the window. It will be hot and it will be uncomfortable, it will be smelly, and it will be loud. The fire will be loud. But if you need to shelter in a car, it's not your best option, but you have some chance if you try and follow those recommendations.
Yeah, thanks for that, Julie. When we talk of places of last resort, the CFA identify these as a bushfire neighbourhood safer place or a neighbourhood safer place. Now, by their very name and very nature, they are a place of last resort. When all else fails and you're stuck for somewhere to go and you're caught in a fire situation, you are allowed to go to a bushfire place of last resort. Please note, these places will not be nice places. Don't expect 5-star accommodation, hot drinks, or someone there to greet you. They are a place of last resort, away from some of the elements of radiant heat. They are purposely chosen to give you that safety margin. However, they are a last resort. And when we talk of the Wurdale area, the nearest place of last resort is actually in Winchelsea. And the location in Winchelsea is a service lane or shopping strip on the car park. And it's about 8.3 kilometres away from Wurdale. So 5-10 minute drive, dependent on the circumstances of the fire. A second place of last resort in the Wurdale area is in Dean's Marsh, which is a bit further away at 13.8 kilometres, and it's the Martians Cafe site car park. So both car park sites, they will offer some level of security and comfort away from the dangerous fire and the radiant heat. Of course, Julie and I would not want you ever to have to seek out a bushfire place of last resort, because following this presentation, you all will accept that we need to be away from fire at the earliest opportunity. We don't want to subject ourselves to the intense radiant heat, the risk of ember attack, And of course, confusion, stress, and agitation. That's the last thing that we want. The CFA are mindful of how damaging fires can be, how traumatizing fires can be. So we suggest that you leave early, adopt your fire plan, and have variations of that fire plan for as many eventualities as possible, and leave the fire area and leave it to the firefighters. At this stage, I just want to show you a slide that depicts some of the different images that you can get of fire, whether it's a fast-moving grass fire, the plumes of smoke that emerge, the intense radiant heat and embers that emanate, and of course, the very nature of fire. It's a force of Mother Nature that cannot be controlled, that is unpredictable. Why be in its way? Why be there when it arrives? Leave early. The resources that I've been referring to during this presentation can be downloaded, and they include your guide to survival and also your guide to property preparation, and that's the PAVS, or Property Advice Visit Service document, that will also contain your leaving early template and also an example of an emergency kit. So they're great resources to download and have access to. And of course, if there's any issues getting hold of those, your local brigade captain, Francis, will be more than happy to contact me and let me know. So Francis, Dean, and the brigade at Wurdale work tremendously hard to maintain safety within the Wurdale and surrounds. But even they're stretched, and they will be stretched at times of bad fire days. So the number one message is to take ownership, understand some of the dynamics that we've spoken about fire, and arm yourself with the tools to stay safe. Arm yourself with the Vic Emergency app, understand the fire danger reading, and understand what your trigger is going to be for you to leave. Feel free to contact Francis on the mobile number that we have there, and he'd be more than happy to talk to you about the capacity of the brigade and also moving forward on your own safety in the village and township. I'd like to launch our final poll now, Julie.
Before we do that, Raj, there's been a question of, is there a last resort in Mauriac or Torquay?
Yes.
I haven't got that information to hand, but I've just looked up. There is one in Anglesey, but I'm not sure how far that is away from where you guys live. Just quickly, I haven't been able to find that. Yeah. If you go onto the CFA website, you may be able to type in, unless you have that information at hand.
Yeah, I'm looking for it now. So in Mauriac, let's have a look.
Because Mauriac is actually on the Aries Inlet, and of course these communities that I'm talking about are on the ocean, on the beach. So that might be.
Well,
is there one?
I'm not sure of the distance from Wurdale, but certainly Mauriac have got one at the Newling Reserve in the Mauriac Community Centre, and that's not too far away. But also Mount Mauriac have got one at Mount Mauriac Reserve as well. So the Newling Reserve and the Mount Mauriac Reserve in Mauriac are two places of bushfire place of last resort. The two that I identified were the two closest ones, and I didn't go further than that to find other neighbouring ones.
And so, of course,
but the way to locate them is to jump onto the internet, type in CFA NSP. So it's CFA NSP for Neighbourhood Safer Place, and it'll ask you for to identify the place of last resort, and then you just put the area where you're looking, and it will tell you what the nearest one is. So it's CFA NSP is the search on the internet.
Thank you. And yes, thank you. I'm glad that helps. Yes, we are going to launch our final poll. Now, this poll is for our benefit. It helps CFA understand whether we're doing a good job in delivering these online sessions. So I'll launch the poll, and the poll just asks, did this meeting give you a better understanding of the bushfire or grass fire risk in your local area? And would you recommend this program to family, friends or neighbours that live in the fire-prone area? So if you could just, like I said, we don't know who's answered what, just answer that. And it is very good to see, Raj, that it has given a better understanding of the risks in the local area, and they would recommend, well, I'm going to end the polling, sorry, and share the results, and you will all see that, yes, it has given a better understanding and you would recommend it. So thank you very much for that.
Fantastic, thank you. Now, one thing that we do acknowledge, and this will be the final slide of our presentation this afternoon. Now, thank you for your time, your patience, and most of all, your feedback. But the final slide looks at, there's certain elements of this presentation that some of you may have found somewhat distressing and may have impacted you. If that is the case, we apologise. But there are a couple of contact numbers that we can provide to you that you can seek guidance from if you have been impacted. We thank you on behalf of Julie and myself for your time, and thanks for joining us this afternoon. This presentation has been recorded, as we mentioned earlier, and it will be available for other members of the Wurdale community to view in their own time, at a time that's convenient to them. And maybe if you were to view it as a group of community members together, just to reinforce the very sense of fire and fire safety essentials. I'm going to stop this recording in a short while, but both Julie and I will remain on the line and open up the microphone. So if any of you, if you would like to talk to us in person, we're happy to have conversation regarding elements of the presentation this afternoon. So once again, on behalf of Julie and myself, thank you. Julie, is there anything that you want to add before I close the recording?
No, I think that's good. Raj,
Super.
no, thank you for attending. And yes, we'll open up the allow to talk if either of you would like, if anyone would like to stay along and ask any final questions.
My thanks to the Wurdale community. Stay safe and stay informed of fire activity. Make those plans and leave early. Thank you.